Cleveland Browns are about to make a decision that could change the entire future of the franchise, and almost nobody is talking about how big this really is. What if the next head coach of the Browns isn't just another hire, but the man who ends up shaping Shedeur's entire NFL career? And what if that move is already closer than anyone expected? Over the last few hours, reports out of Cleveland have started to feel less like rumors and more like the beginning of something massive. Names are flying around, insiders are dropping hints, and one figure keeps rising above all the noise: John Harbaugh. Think about that for a second. A Super Bowl winning coach, one of the most respected leaders in football, suddenly linked to a franchise that has spent decades searching for stability. Is this just media hype, or is something serious happening behind closed doors? The Browns are still interviewing other candidates, still doing the usual front office routine, but the conversation always circles back to Harbaugh. That doesn't happen by accident. When one name dominates every discussion, it usually means a decision has already started forming. And then there's Shedeur, the real centerpiece of all this. Every coaching move Cleveland makes from this point forward is really about one question: who can actually develop him the right way? Not just win a few games, not just call clever plays, but build a real foundation around a young quarterback who has already dealt with more chaos than most rookies ever should. If the Browns get this hire wrong, Shedeur could become just another talented player wasted by bad leadership. But if they get it right, everything changes. What makes this even more interesting is the timing. Reports claim Harbaugh could be involved as early as next week. That's not distant off-season chatter, that's immediate. At the same time, the Ravens are interviewing Kevin Stefanski, adding another strange layer to the story. Coaches moving, organizations shifting, power dynamics changing. It feels like the ground is moving under Cleveland's feet. And in the middle of all of it stands Shedeur, waiting to see whether this franchise will finally choose a real direction. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The Browns have been here before. Big promises, big names, and then the same old results. Fans have heard the word reset more times than they can count. So why does this moment feel different? Maybe it's because Harbaugh doesn't walk into situations without demanding control. Maybe it's because Cleveland seems willing, for once, to give a coach real authority. Or maybe it's because everyone knows Shedeur's career is hanging in the balance. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want to stay locked in on all the latest NFL drama, make sure you hit that like button. It helps the video reach more people who love this content just like you. And if you're new here, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss another update, reaction, or storyline as it unfolds in real time. I also want to hear from you in the comments. What do you think about Shedeur Sanders' performance and the Browns' collapse? Drop your thoughts below and let's talk about it. And don't forget to share this video with friends who follow the NFL. Your support truly keeps the channel moving forward. One decision, one coach, one chance to finally stop the cycle. The question isn't just who the Browns will hire, it's whether they're ready to change who they've always been. And what happens next might shock a lot of people. Right now, the situation in Cleveland feels like a storm building behind closed doors. Officially, the Browns are still following the normal coaching search process, requesting interviews, meeting candidates, doing the paperwork every franchise has to do. On paper, it looks routine. But what's being said off the record tells a very different story. Insiders around the team are hinting that John Harbaugh could be moving toward Cleveland sooner than anyone expected, possibly within days. That kind of timeline doesn't happen unless serious conversations are already underway. At the same time, the Browns are keeping other names in the mix. Reports mention interest in the Bills' offensive coordinator, the Rams' defensive coordinator, and even a former Browns assistant from years back. That's the public side of things, the part designed to show the league they're doing their homework. But fans have noticed something. None of those names are generating the same energy Harbaugh is. Every time the discussion heats up, it circles right back to him. It's almost like the search has a headline, and the rest are just footnotes. Then came another twist. The Ravens announced they interviewed Kevin Stefanski for their head coaching job. That single update sent people into overdrive trying to connect dots. Is Stefanski preparing an exit? Is Baltimore looking for a replacement in case Harbaugh leaves? Or is this all just leverage in a much bigger chess game? Nobody is saying anything directly, but the timing feels too perfect to be random. Behind all of this is the uncomfortable reality Cleveland can't ignore. They don't just need a coach, they need an identity. For years, the franchise has jumped from plan to plan, hoping something would finally stick. New systems, new voices, new promises. And every reset has left players like Shedeur caught in the middle, learning a different philosophy before the last one even had a chance to breathe. That's why this search feels heavier than usual. It isn't just about who calls plays on Sunday. It's about whether the Browns are finally ready to commit to one clear direction. What makes the Harbaugh rumors so believable is how specific the details have become. Talk of salary expectations, assistant coaching budgets, and roster control doesn't sound like idle speculation. Those are the kinds of things discussed only when both sides are serious. It paints a picture of a coach who isn't interested in being a figurehead, and an organization that might actually be willing to hand over real power for the first time in years. Still, nothing is official, and that uncertainty is driving the tension. One day it sounds inevitable, the next day another candidate pops up. Cleveland is trying to look patient while the clock keeps ticking. Every move, every interview request, every leak adds another layer to the drama. And through it all, the biggest question hangs in the air. Is this finally the moment the Browns stop experimenting and start building something real? But the answer to that depends on one man more than anyone else, John Harbaugh. And why he matters so much is a story of its own. John Harbaugh matters because he represents something Cleveland hasn't truly had in decades: proven authority. Not potential, not upside, not another bright coordinator being promoted too soon, but a coach who has already built a championship culture from the ground up. In a league where franchises recycle the same experiments over and over, Harbaugh is one of the few names that immediately changes how a team is viewed. The moment his name entered the conversation, this stopped being an ordinary coaching search. What makes him different isn't just the Super Bowl ring or the years of winning seasons. It's the way his teams are built. Harbaugh programs don't look confused. They don't feel soft. Players understand roles, expectations are clear, and the locker room speaks one language. That might sound simple, but Cleveland has lived the opposite reality for so long that stability almost feels radical. When people say the Browns need a culture shift, Harbaugh is exactly what that phrase looks like in real life. There's also the part most teams won't admit out loud. Harbaugh doesn't walk into buildings just to follow orders. Rumors suggest he would want significant control over the roster, his own personnel voice, and a serious budget for his staff. Some see that as demanding. Others see it as accountability. A coach who asks for that kind of power is also accepting full responsibility for what happens next. No excuses, no finger-pointing, just results. And that approach connects directly to Shedeur. A young quarterback doesn't need 5 different opinions pulling him in 5 directions. He needs one clear leader who sets the tone for everything: protection plans, offensive philosophy, even how the media noise is handled. Harbaugh has spent years working with strong personalities and high expectations. He knows how to challenge a quarterback without breaking confidence, and how to protect one without lowering standards. People sometimes forget how many talented quarterbacks fade simply because the structure around them never settles. New coordinator one year, new playbook the next, different voice in the headset every season. Harbaugh represents the opposite of that cycle. If he commits to a quarterback, the entire building moves in that direction. That kind of alignment is rare, and for someone like Shedeur, it could be the difference between surviving in the league and truly growing in it. There's another layer too: respect. Veterans listen to Harbaugh. Front offices negotiate differently with him. Even opponents prepare differently when he's on the sideline. Cleveland hasn't had that kind of gravitational figure in a long time. Bringing him in wouldn't just change the play calls, it would change how the Browns are talked about across the league. Of course, none of this guarantees instant wins. Harbaugh isn't a magic fix, but he is a foundation, and Cleveland has been trying to build on sand for years. That's why his name carries so much weight in this search. It isn't about chasing headlines, it's about finally choosing competence over hope. And when you look at it through Shedeur's eyes, the picture becomes even clearer. This isn't just about hearing a coach. It's about deciding what kind of quarterback the Browns want him to become. Everything about this coaching search eventually leads back to one person, Shedeur. Strip away the contracts, the front office politics, the media debates, and what's left is a young quarterback standing at the most fragile stage of his career. Talent got him to the NFL, but talent alone won't keep him there. What he needs now is something far less glamorous and far more important: structure, belief, and a coach who actually understands how to grow a quarterback instead of just using him. For Shedeur, the last stretch hasn't been simple. There were moments when the offense stalled, and it felt like he was waiting for a real chance to take control. Moments when decisions around him didn't match what fans were seeing on the field. That kind of uncertainty can quietly damage a player's confidence. A quarterback lives on rhythm, trust, and repetition. When those things are inconsistent, development slows, no matter how gifted the arm is. That's why the idea of Harbaugh matters so much. Shedeur doesn't need a coach who treats him like another experiment in a long line of Browns quarterbacks. He needs someone who looks at him as the centerpiece and builds everything around that reality. Protection schemes, run game balance, receiver roles, all of it has to connect to what helps him play fast and fearless. Without that, even the best prospects start second-guessing themselves. There's also the mental side nobody likes to talk about. Young quarterbacks hear everything. The comparisons, the doubts, the social media noise. If the organization isn't strong enough to block that out, it creeps into the locker room. Shedeur needs a head coach who can stand in front of the storm and make it clear, this is our guy. Not for a week, not until the next loss, but for the long road ahead. Look around the league and the pattern is obvious. Quarterbacks who succeed early almost always land with coaches who simplify the game before expanding it. They get clear reads, consistent terminology, and patience when mistakes happen. Those who fail are usually thrown into chaos, new voices every season, playbooks changing, expectations shifting. Cleveland has to decide which story Shedeur will live. There's no question he has the traits teams chase: confidence, toughness, the ability to handle big moments. But those traits need guidance. A coach who challenges him without tearing him down. A staff that teaches instead of panics. Teammates who feel the organization is moving in one direction instead of three. That environment is what turns potential into production. And the clock is already ticking. The NFL doesn't wait for anyone to figure things out. If Cleveland gets this wrong, Shedeur could become another name added to a painful list. If they get it right, he could be the quarterback who finally changes how this franchise is remembered. That's the real weight behind every rumor about Harbaugh, every interview request, every late-night report. It isn't just about hearing a famous coach. It's about giving Shedeur something he hasn't truly had yet, a fair, stable chance to become who he's supposed to be. Kevin Stefanski interviewing with Baltimore didn't just add another headline to the coaching carousel. It changed the way people look at everything that happened with Shedeur. Moves like that are never random. When a coach connected to a young quarterback suddenly explores another job, it forces uncomfortable questions about what was really going on behind the scenes. Was Stefanski already planning an exit, or did the situation in Cleveland simply reach a point where both sides knew a split was coming? Fans remember how the season unfolded. There were stretches when the offense clearly needed a spark, yet Shedeur often felt like the last option rather than the first. Opportunities came late or not at all, and explanations never sounded convincing. Rumors suggested trust issues. Reports claimed philosophical differences. None of it was ever said directly, but the pattern was hard to ignore. A head coach is supposed to be the loudest believer in his quarterback. When that belief looks hesitant, the entire locker room notices. Players can read body language better than any analyst. If a coach seems unsure about his own quarterback, why would anyone else feel confident? That's the quiet damage that doesn't show up in box scores but affects everything. Stefanski's interest elsewhere almost feels like confirmation of what many suspected. The relationship with Shedeur never fully clicked. Maybe it was style. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was simply two people seeing football in completely different ways. Whatever the reason, the result was the same. A young quarterback trying to grow without the firm backing he needed. And now, with Baltimore in the picture, the message gets louder. If Stefanski ends up leaving, it will look less like Cleveland losing a coach and more like a reset both sides were already preparing for. That matters because it reframes the whole Shedeur conversation. His struggles wouldn't just be rookie growing pains, they'd be symptoms of a system that never fully committed to him. There's also the awkward reality of timing. Interviewing while the Browns are in the middle of their own search creates a strange power dynamic. It suggests Stefanski might not see himself as part of Cleveland's long-term future. For a franchise trying to project stability, that's not a small detail. It raises the question, was he ever truly invested in building around Shedeur, or was he always looking for a different path? None of this means Stefanski is a bad coach, but good coaches can still be the wrong fit for certain quarterbacks. Development requires chemistry, patience, and a shared vision. Without those, even smart football minds end up pulling in opposite directions. What his interview signals more than anything is that Cleveland stands at a crossroads. They can continue with familiar voices and hope things suddenly change, or they can admit the experiment didn't work and choose a different direction entirely. For Shedeur, that decision will shape the next chapter of his career. And while Stefanski weighs his options, the shadow of John Harbaugh grows even larger, making the contrast between the two paths impossible to ignore. Beyond Harbaugh and the Stefanski drama, another set of names keeps floating through Cleveland, the so-called creative options. Coaches like Mike McDaniel represent the modern, offense-first vision that excites fans on social media. Slick play designs, motion-heavy schemes, and highlight reel concepts look great on Sundays. But there's a massive difference between drawing plays and running an entire franchise, and that gap is where Cleveland has burned itself before. McDaniel is the perfect example. On paper, he checks a lot of boxes: innovative mind, strong run-game ideas, ability to design around a quarterback's strengths. Yet Miami's recent seasons showed how quickly that shine can fade when injuries hit, defenses adjust, and real pressure arrives. Being a head coach isn't just about creativity. It's about crisis management, locker room authority, and making hard decisions when the fun stuff stops working. For Shedeur, that distinction is everything. He doesn't need a coach still learning how to control a building. He needs someone who already knows how to steady one. A young quarterback paired with a first-time head coach can be exciting, but it can also turn into two people trying to grow up at the same time. Cleveland can't afford that kind of double experiment again. There are other coordinator names mentioned too: assistants from Buffalo, Los Angeles, Green Bay, all respected football minds. Each brings a different flavor: defensive toughness, quarterback-friendly systems, analytic approaches. But the same question hangs over all of them. Can they handle the weight of leading an entire organization, or would the Browns be signing up for another long learning curve? History isn't kind to teams that gamble on upside alone. The league is full of brilliant coordinators who became overwhelmed the moment the headset turned into the big chair. Managing veterans, dealing with media storms, protecting a young quarterback's confidence, those things don't come from playbooks. They come from experience, and Cleveland has learned the cost of confusing the two. That's why fans feel torn. Part of them craves something fresh after years of disappointment. The idea of an imaginative offensive mind working with Shedeur is tempting. Picture explosive schemes, tailored concepts, and a system built around his strengths. It sounds perfect until adversity arrives and the room needs a steady hand more than clever design. The Browns also have to think about the locker room they already have. Veterans who have survived multiple resets don't want another trial run. They want a leader who commands respect the moment he walks in. Coordinator hires often need time to earn that, and time is the one thing Cleveland seems to be running out of. So while the McDaniel-type options bring intrigue, they also bring risk, the kind that could quietly derail Shedeur before he ever gets a real chance. Creativity can win highlights. Stability wins seasons. And that contrast keeps pushing the conversation back to the same uncomfortable truth. Cleveland must decide whether it wants excitement or certainty, potential or proof. The answer to that question will reveal more about the Browns' future than any press conference ever could. When you step back from the names and rumors, this coaching search says something deeper about the Cleveland Browns than any press release ever will. It reveals how the organization sees itself, as a franchise ready to grow up, or as one still chasing quick fixes. Every interview request, every leaked demand, every hesitation is really a mirror showing what the Browns believe they deserve. For years, Cleveland has lived in reaction mode. One bad season led to a new philosophy, one tough stretch to another reset. Coaches came and went, quarterbacks were rotated like spare parts, and the word patience became almost a joke. Fans learned not to trust big promises because they'd heard them too many times before. That history hangs over this moment like a shadow. If the Browns truly push for someone like Harbaugh, it would signal a rare admission. That stability matters more than ego. It would mean the front office is finally willing to share power instead of protecting it. That's not just a football decision, it's an identity decision. Teams that win long-term don't operate like political campaigns. They operate like aligned companies where everyone answers to the same vision. On the other hand, choosing another experimental route would say the opposite. It would suggest Cleveland is still afraid of committing fully to one direction. Another coordinator hire, another system change, another hope that this time the cycle magically breaks. Fans have seen that movie too many times to get excited about the trailer. What makes this crossroads so important is timing. The roster isn't empty. The defense has pieces. The offense has potential. And most importantly, Shedeur is at the stage where direction matters more than talent. The Browns aren't rebuilding from zero. They're deciding whether to build properly or keep stacking bricks without a blueprint. There's also the message this sends around the league. Players watch how organizations treat their young quarterbacks. Agents notice which franchises protect their investments and which ones let them drift. A strong hire could change how free agents view Cleveland overnight. A weak one could confirm every negative stereotype that already exists. The front office knows this, even if they don't say it. That's why the process feels heavier than usual. It isn't just about finding a coach to win a few games next fall. It's about answering a question the Browns have avoided for decades. Who are we actually trying to be? For Shedeur, that answer will define his early career. For the fans, it will determine whether hope feels real or recycled. And for the organization, it will show whether lessons were finally learned or simply forgotten again. The bigger picture isn't complicated. Cleveland stands between two paths, one built on proven leadership and long-term thinking, the other on another round of hopeful experiments. The choice will echo far beyond this season. And as the decision gets closer, the noise will only grow louder, because what the Browns do next will tell everyone exactly how serious they are about changing their story. All of this circles back to one simple truth. The Browns are not just choosing a head coach, they're choosing a future. Every rumor about Harbaugh, every interview with another candidate, every quiet leak about control and budgets is really about one question. Are they finally ready to do things the right way? Cleveland has spent years searching for shortcuts. Hopping one bold move would erase decades of instability. But real change has never worked like that. For Shedeur, this moment feels personal even if nobody says it out loud. His career is still young enough to be shaped, but old enough to be damaged. Quarterbacks don't get endless chances in this league. They get windows, and those windows close fast when organizations hesitate. The next coach will decide whether Shedeur's story becomes one of growth or one of what could have been. Fans can sense the weight of it. You hear it in every debate: experience versus creativity, control versus collaboration, Harbaugh versus the field. There isn't a perfect answer, only consequences. Hire the proven leader and you risk clashing egos and heavy expectations. Hire the innovative coordinator and you risk another learning curve while Shedeur waits for stability. Either path demands courage the Browns haven't always shown. What makes this different from past searches is the spotlight. Cleveland can't hide behind excuses anymore. The roster has talent, the division is competitive, and the quarterback question finally has a face. This isn't about rebuilding from nothing. It's about deciding what kind of foundation they want under their most important player. Maybe Harbaugh is the answer. Maybe it's someone nobody is even talking about yet. But the decision has to be bigger than chasing headlines. It has to be about creating an environment where Shedeur can fail without fear, learn without chaos, and lead without looking over his shoulder. That's the standard, not the dream. The NFL is full of teams that waited too long to be honest with themselves. They chose comfort over conviction and watched young quarterbacks pay the price. Cleveland has a chance to break that pattern, but chances don't last forever. The clock is already moving, and every day without direction adds pressure to a player who should be focused only on football. So the conversation doesn't end with one hire. It ends with what that hire represents. Are the Browns building a culture or just buying time? Are they protecting their quarterback or testing him again? Those answers will show up on Sundays long after the press conferences fade. Now it's your turn. Do you believe Cleveland needs a proven leader like Harbaugh to steady the ship, or is a fresh, creative mind the better path for Shedeur? Drop your thoughts, hit like if you want real stability for this team, and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next, because this story is only getting started.
If you enjoyed today's breakdown and want to keep up with all the drama, trades, and behind-the-scenes action in the NFL, then don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps this channel grow and lets us know you love this kind of content. And hey, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with your friends, your group chats, or anyone who loves football as much as you do. The more the conversation spreads, the better it gets. Most importantly, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel and tap the notification bell. That way, you'll never miss when we drop fresh stories, wild rumors, or breaking updates that the mainstream media won't talk about.